views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. The Texas abortion law, formerly known in Texas as Senate Bill 8, prohibits abortions before many women even know that they're pregnant. And it'll be hard to challenge this law in the courts because rather than establish a court mandate, it empowers private citizens the right to sue, not even the woman involved, but any and everyone connected to the process, including the cab driver who may take the woman to the clinic or the administrator in the clinic. It also requires parental approval, which is problematic for many teenage girls for a variety of reasons. We're going to talk about that tonight and its implications for the Constitution, Roe v. Wade, and for Bronx providers and women. But at the same time, the city's Department of Health has been managing a Teen Connections program that has been largely successful in engaging girls in programs and counseling and support that exists essentially as a preventative measure against teenage pregnancy. That's also on our table tonight. So please join me in welcoming the Vice President of Political and Government Affairs for the National Institute of Reproductive Health. It is Danielle Castaldi-Micca. Ms. Micca, nice to have you with us.
Thanks so much.
And the Director of Sexual and Reproductive Health with the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. She runs that Teen Connections program. Welcome back to BronxTalk, Estelle Raboni.
Thank you so much, Gary. Nice to be here.
It's great to have you. Let's start with you, Ms. Raboni. Let's just talk about now. I got the numbers here, which, and you and I have been on the air with this, on BronxTalk with this for years when the program started. Reached 6,147 teens way back when, the first 5 years. And now we're up to 50,000, more, almost 10 times more. 50,964 to be precise. So congratulations on running a successful program. Number one, why was the program created, and why do you think it's done well? You've engaged girls in kind of healthful activities.
Thank you so much, Gary. It's done well because we're giving young people the information they need to make good decisions about their own bodies and their own lives. Historically, in the areas of the city that we work in, teen pregnancy rates have been high, and it's really a lack of access to comprehensive sex ed, good quality sex ed, and as well as being connected to the services of high quality teen-friendly clinics. That's what makes the program so successful and young people so receptive to it.
I want to just add in the nature of life in the Bronx in particular. It's a tough place to live, especially for many young girls. And so the things, and I recently was talking to school principals and leaders, and they were saying the problems out there, especially right now when they've been cooped up and they bring all those problems in. Of course, 10% of our school population is coming to school out of the shelters. The climate complicates your efforts to say, well, make good decisions, feel comfortable about yourself, be healthy, right? Talk to me a little bit about how the program is constructed to serve those particular needs for my kids, Bronx kids.
Yes, absolutely. So we work in every environment in which young people are in. So the majority of young people still go to school. There's this perception like, oh, in the Bronx, young people are not going to school. That's not true. Young people go to school. So we're in middle schools and high schools. We're also in District 75 schools. Those are young people who are special education students and have special needs, they also need access to this information and to these services. We also work with foster care agencies and juvenile justice programs. So just because young people may not be in school or may have gotten into a little bit of difficulties and some trouble doesn't mean that they don't also should have access to this information and services. And it's reaching young people wherever they are and then providing the information that they need in a friendly environment. The idea is to create environments and neighborhoods where young people are supported in their decision making, in the information that they receive, and they get linked to the services of high quality teen friendly clinics. So even when they're getting information in the school or in a program, they also get the support from a clinician. And that's what makes the program successful.
Let's answer, if you would, a very simple question. What do they do? They sit around in a group. I mean, listen, I'm much older than all of you and all the kids. When I had sex ed at DeWitt Clinton High School, it was terrible. It provided nothing. I still had to learn. So what do you do, and how do we get girls from point A to point B so they make good decisions for themselves? And then, we're going to follow up with abortion, that as often as possible is not one of the issues they'll have to deal with.
Well, I'm sorry, Gary, that you had a bad experience with your sex ed in DeWitt Clinton.
Too long ago to worry about.
And you probably had it very late. So that's another problem, is that...
And I have to add, in an all-boys high school, and that didn't help.
Yes, absolutely. So historically in New York City, your sex ed was probably given to you in 11th grade because it was the last credit that you needed to graduate. And that's already too late because the majority of young people are already sexually active by 11th grade. So we actually implement sex ed in 9th grade. And now with middle schools, we're implementing it in 8th grade because we see that there's a significant jump in sexual activity between 8th and 9th grade. And the idea is to provide evidence-based programs. So we don't just do what we think is a good idea. We actually follow the science. And there are programs out there that have been tested and evaluated to work. And it basically teaches young people negotiation skills if they're trying to.
They sit around in a group?
Yeah, it's health education class. It's sex ed in your health education class taught by a certified health education teacher or a teacher who has been trained to implement this program. They receive the support of the Department of Health in terms of how to convey this information in a non-judgmental way, how to answer particularly challenging questions. How to negotiate condom use, how to access contraception.
And boys in the room at the same time?
Absolutely, yeah. We don't suggest that boys not get information that perhaps girls, get that piece of information. We think that it's best to have both audiences in the same room.
It sounds about as healthy as can be. And before we turn on to Ms. Castaldi-Micca, I want to talk, get the information for girls or boys too, or parents who say, you know what, I want to make sure my child gets involved. How do they contact? How do they talk to their school? Do they talk to you? What do they have to do?
So we are in most Bronx high schools and in Brooklyn high schools. But if they wanted to go to the website, which is nyc.gov/health, and they do a search for New York City Teens Connection, they will find our webpage and then they can get connected to me.
Ms. Castaldi-Micca, before we talk specifically about the Texas abortion law, which a lot of people have in their minds and have a lot of questions about, what do you think of when you hear what Ms. Raboni is talking about in terms of the scope of working at the National Institute of Reproductive Health? What does it make you think?
Sure. Well, at NIRH, our focus is on the ways that states and municipal governments, cities and towns can help improve the reproductive rights and lives of the people that live there. And so comprehensive sex ed is a huge part of that. I always feel very fortunate to get to work with Estelle and I'm a big fan of the Teen Connect program. But unfortunately, it's not citywide yet. And we're looking at.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah, let's
I somehow
get more money and get it
slipped my
across the
attention.
city.
That's not
Across
good.
the city. And
So
across New
we're
York
in Brooklyn
State.
in the Bronx, Estelle. If that's
So we're actually in 16 neighborhoods around the city. We actually focus our efforts in the neighborhoods with the highest rates of teen pregnancy and STI rates. And the idea is to really focus our resources in the neighborhoods that need it the most. So Danielle is right. I mean, we're not in the financial district. We're not in the wealthiest neighborhoods in New York City,
Right.
because quite frankly, they don't really need our services.
as much.
Right. But all young people do need those services and need to be connected to them.
Well, we're going to get into this Texas abortion law, maybe, and New York State discussing their own Reproductive Health Act, maybe in that process can include this kind of funding so that, we don't have to have this question as often as we have it. But back to you, Ms. Castaldi-Micca. So what do you think? This is the kind of thing that you would support wholeheartedly. The city is doing the right thing here.
Oh, the city is absolutely doing the right thing, and can always be doing more. We're currently working on legislation at the state level to require that every school district have K through 12 sex education that is much like the education that's currently being provided by Estelle and her team, age appropriate, based in science and evidence, inclusive, non-shaming. And we know that this is the real sort of solution to a lot of things that we've identified as problems. If we want to reduce STI infections, if we want to reduce unintended pregnancies, if we want to reduce sexual violence and sexual harassment, comprehensive sex ed is the way to do it.
And delivered at a personal level that young people can understand in particular. All right, let's just talk about SB 8. The Texas abortion law. It bans abortions once cardiac activity can be detected in the embryo. Typically, this occurs around the 6th week of pregnancy. In fact, it's not even considered a fetus till a week 9. It landed like a bomb. It set off a tidal wave to the choice community. Give me general. What do you think? And what's next? I mean, we could talk about the state. We could talk about Roe v. Wade. We could talk about all kinds of things. What strikes you first?
Well, first and foremost, SB 8 is a real travesty. I can't emphasize enough how truly horrible it is, for a couple of reasons that you've already mentioned. It's important for people to understand that 6 weeks is not 6 weeks of pregnancy. It's 6 weeks from last menstrual period, which, if you're not used to counting cycles, on a regular basis, most people don't know that they've even had a late period until probably about 5 weeks. So that's not providing a whole lot of time to make decisions or take action. But more importantly,
let me just interject. There are immense forces, religious forces, which captivate a lot of the imagination, if you will, of Americans who say, good, we want this. This is the way to stop this. It's incredibly ingenious for people like you. Maybe you think diabolical, but they have done a very good job at crafting this over a period of years so that you would say what you just said, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, listen, it's designed to prevent people from having abortions. That's the goal, and to criminalize them. And this bill not only does that, but it criminalizes all the people who potentially help them as well, which is a really unprecedented move that limits the state of Texas's ability to be sued to stop the bill, because they say that they're not enforcing it.
That's right.
Which is why the Department of Justice has gotten involved.
Well, so here's the thing. Let's start there, and then we'll talk about the implications that take it further. The Department of Justice calls it, coming out of Biden's administration, of course. They argued in its emergency motion that the state adopted the law to prevent women from exercising their constitutional rights. Is it unconstitutional, especially as judged by a Supreme Court that did a shadow docket ruling, 5-4 late at night to give them the right to do this? I mean, are we on the way to losing Roe v. Wade?
So it is unconstitutional by the current standards that the court has upheld, because that shadow decision didn't really make a decision. They just said it could go into effect while we're busy making a decision. What we're really going to see is another case that's going to come to the Supreme Court at the end of this year called Jackson Women's Clinic versus Dobbs, which is about a ban out of Mississippi. And if the Supreme Court upholds that ban, which given the makeup of the Supreme Court is highly likely,
or possible,
the only way for them to do that is to basically overturn the precedent around what restrictions are allowed to go into effect that came out of a case called Planned Parenthood v. Casey. It would be extremely detrimental, which is why we're doing a ton of work to make sure, both here in New York and across the country, to make sure that states that can are working to change their laws to protect access to abortion, because we're going to need it.
Is that where the most effective action is going to be? In other words, New Yorkers and Bronxites are going to look to New York State to keep the woman's right to choose in place here in the state, that they'll have to, establish that. Is that what we're looking at right now?
Yeah, absolutely. There could be federal actions taken. In the House, they are considering clean legislation that doesn't have the Hyde Amendment in it, which is the amendment that prohibits federal funding from being used for abortion. So that impacts people on Medicaid, federal employees, military personnel, et cetera. Right. They're also considering a piece of legislation called the Women's Health Protection Act, which Nancy Pelosi has pledged to bring to a vote, all of which is very good, but we probably won't see past the Senate without filibuster reform. So while we're working through some major sort of constitutional issues in Congress, states and localities can do a ton of work to protect access and to protect the providers that serve in their states, which is what we did in New York in 2019 with the Reproductive Health Act, which decriminalized abortion in New York. It was previously regulated as a crime. So it removed the threat of criminal prosecution, and which we can continue to expand on. New York City took an unprecedented first step a couple of years ago of putting $250,000 a year in the city budget to fund abortion care. So that means anybody who's accessing abortion in New York City can apply for funding if they can't afford the medical care that they need, whether or not they're from New York City. Yesterday, the city of Portland did the same. I think it was $200,000. And we've seen even the city of Austin put money in their budget. They were prohibited by their state from doing it to pay for medical care, but put money in for practical support, like gas money or a bus ticket to get to a clinic, for example. The other thing that—
Can I just interject? I want to ask just kind of it's so the whole notion of suing one of your fellow citizens is remarkable. Does that mean if the Supreme Court allows it, and it seems to be the lay of the land, the law of the land, I could then, or somebody could create a law that says gun owners, anybody who has a gun, could be sued by me individually or by somebody else who says we don't want them to have a gun. And now any legislation of something that's unpopular, they could legislate that out. No more beer drinking. I mean, I don't know, could take it as far as you want. Is that what the upholding of this law would suggest?
Well, I'll preface this by saying I'm not an expert on civil litigation.
My question.
I'm not an attorney, and I'm not an expert on civil litigation, so I don't want to necessarily answer that. But what I will say is that it's really unprecedented, and in fact, one of the few examples we have in our national history of laws that were enforced by basically citizen vigilantes is the Runaway Slave Act. It's one of the only other examples we have where the states empowered citizens to turn each other in.
Take matters into their own hands.
Yeah, which is not a great.
Yeah, I want to bring Estelle Raboni into the equation. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, Gary, I just wanted to say that we keep talking about decriminalizing, but the fact of the matter is that what this law does is it really makes life very dangerous for Texas women and girls, and potentially for the rest of the country, right? Because we know from history that before New York State decriminalized abortion, complications and deaths from clandestine abortions were commonplace. It was routine. Women died from complications from abortions that they had because it was not legal. So that's the issue. It's the health and safety of women and girls who now won't have access to that very basic medical, service. I mean, it's a basic medical service for women and girls.
I want to partially redefine who gets directly affected. We've talked about teenagers, and of course that becomes a factor. One of the Bronx providers I spoke to said, there are women, let's say, who are single moms of 2 children or 3 children, and they get pregnant. So these are adult women. They also want to have an abortion. And yet this sort of a law would hurt them as well. So while it's very easy to say this is going to hurt teenage girls, it very possibly could, have a wider net. Ms. Raboni, you talked to us before the show about information that the city and your program is providing. If it does come to that, how do people access that? What is that?
Yeah, I mean, historically, New York City has been a haven for women who are seeking abortion services. And just recently, the health department revised its web pages on abortion and how to access abortion providers, as well as how to get housing services and how to get reimbursed for travel expenses if they come to New York City to obtain an abortion. So that is available on the website. If you go to nyc.gov/health and search for abortion, you'll be able to find that information there.
Very, very useful. Ms. Castaldi-Micca, let's I heard something that I'm just horrified about how insane this is that there are ads out there encouraging men to have sex with women, get them pregnant, so they could sue them and make $10,000 on it. I mean, the criminality, the violence is just, I don't even know what to say about it. I'm sure you're as horrified, even more so maybe than me or anybody else. But that's the mentality that seems to be out there. What's next? What do you recommend? Go ahead.
Well, a couple of things. I think to your point and to Estelle's point, you're very correct, and the providers you talk to are very correct. A huge number of the people who do access abortion care are already moms. But we also know that the people who already have the hardest time accessing medical care are going to be the ones hardest hit, right? So that will include young people, that will include poor people, that will certainly include immigrants, that will be predominantly felt by women of color. Rich white ladies will continue to be able to access abortion, which they have always been able to access. So laws like this always have a disproportionate effect. And to your point about those ads, I've seen some about it. I don't know how real it is, although I don't ever want to underestimate the power of both sort of greed and misogyny in our world.
Yeah, right.
As far as what we should be doing next, I want to note that the changes that the Department of Health has made to their website are really, really important and exciting. And in fact, just this week, Governor Hochul made an announcement about changes that she's looking to make to expand abortion access. And that includes also doing a similar thing with the State Department of Health website. Also in New York City, I've been really fortunate to have a great partnership with the Health and Hospitals Corporation. Our public hospitals are so committed to providing this care and to making sure that people know that they provide that care, because I think oftentimes people think you have to go to an independent clinic or a Planned Parenthood to get abortion care. But the other thing that I think we need to really make sure that we're doing is buttressing the state of New York and our laws from other federal involvement. And that includes future legislation to enshrine full insurance coverage for abortion, and also potentially changing our state constitution to explicitly protect abortion rights. Because there is always the possibility of, as I mentioned, there could be positive congressional action. There could be negative congressional action if Congress shifts too, and we need to be prepared for that.
I want to give each of you a chance to sum up. Looking at the state of New York, I don't want to say as a haven, but in some ways the borders are there, and you know what the laws are on this side of the border. A Democratic female governor that helps, and a female majority leader in the state Senate, and a Democrat, a Bronx Democrat. I'm always hopeful about that in the Assembly. What do you think? I mean, are you hopeful? Are you not hopeful? Are you always cautious? Do you think there's a clear avenue, I guess, for New Yorkers, but concern elsewhere? Just give me your summary statement, so to speak. That's for you, Ms. Castaldi-Micca.
Oh.
Yeah, you'll get a chance afterwards.
Sure. I think that when we made some changes in the state Senate to get a Democratic majority and a strong Democratic majority, which does not always mean a pro-choice majority, but it does in this case, and with the elevation of Governor Hochul, I do feel really, really optimistic that our legislators, who for the most part are typically supportive of abortion rights, will be motivated to make the changes we need to make.
So you're cautiously hopeful or optimistic, if you want.
In New York.
In New York. Okay, that's fair enough. I'm going to ask Ms. Raboni for her final comments as well, and I will characterize it maybe as this: nobody is encouraging abortion. We're just providing that as an option, and if a girl or woman feels they need that option, the thoughts are that they should be available. We don't want to get into this head that, we're talking about it on BronxTalk, so they want everybody to, abort babies. That is far from the truth. So, Ms. Raboni, on that note, what is your final message here for girls and women and for the public at large?
Well, Gary, I would say that we would not be doing this work if we were not hopeful. So we do this work because we are hopeful, and we do believe that historically New York and New Yorkers have supported women's right to choose, women's right to self-determination and bodily autonomy. And we've done that since 1970, and I think we'll continue to do that moving forward, regardless of what happens to the rest of the country. Unfortunately, we are a haven, and we will continue to be a haven.
Ms. Castaldi-Micca, if people want to access NIRH, how do they get to you guys? And they want to say, we want to support the effort, we have something to say. How do they do that?
You can come to our website at nirhealth.org, or any of our social media channels, which are all at NIRHealth. Or for our action fund at NIRH Action.
And the same kind of contact question for you, Ms. Raboni. Let's talk about how especially girls and women and parents can get their children, girls and guys, you established that, into your program so they make the right decision.
NYC.gov, NYC.gov, and just search for New York City Teens Connection or search for abortion to get more information.
Well, Danielle Castaldi-Micca, thank you so much from the the National Institute of Reproductive Health, and Estelle Raboni from the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Good night. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.